Hello and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events and announcements inside the video games industry, discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and glue holds it all together is a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's kick for the episode. As the Rolling Stones have taught us, you can't always get what you want. And as good as this past January has been for games that have been in development and gestation, long anticipated sequels for quite some time, in the form of Resident Evil 2 and Kingdom Hearts 3, we've also gotten some bad news. And that's come in the form of Metroid Prime 4, the long anticipated and long awaited Metroid Prime 4, being essentially scrapped. Nintendo was working on it, it's no longer being developed internally at Nintendo, it is going to its original owners in Retro Studios, and it's posed a lot of questions for what they were up to, what it means for the game, and we're going to discuss all of those things in this week's episode of The Insider.
今日はメトロイドプライムシリーズ最新作であるメトロイドプライム4についてお伝えしたいことがあります。
So we first need to talk about what Metroid Prime 4 was. Well, of course, it's the much anticipated sequel to the trilogy that was released across the GameCube and Wii eras. But the game itself was one that was often debated, and little nuggets of information have come out since, the validity of which have not necessarily been confirmed. Nintendo has been tight-lipped, but some really well-known authorities in the gaming space, and even just internet sleuthers, have done a little bit of digging into what was going on in the development behind Metroid Prime 4. And essentially, before it was cancelled, it was an amalgamation of lots of work from teams and individuals scattered all around the globe, in a very similar fashion to what we've seen in most profoundly, in Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Ori and the Blind Forest. It's the original release, and the team was scattered all around the world in different parts, I guess, of the same country in a few cases, and they were all working on this project, and all the pieces were meant to come together. And for as good as some components were, there were others that were really suffering, and eventually Nintendo made the call to kill it. So the game was axed, and then I guess Nintendo was still eager to keep the project going, which is commendable at that particular point. And the original developers of the Metroid Prime 1 through 3 games, Retro Studios, stepped up to the plate and made a pitch to Nintendo that Nintendo liked, and so Metroid Prime 4 is back in the hands of Retro. So, how's it going to go? Well, I've got some theories and I've got some things that I want to discuss, and we're going to begin to do that next.
発表以降、皆様に何ら続報をお伝えできておりませんでしたが、その後も開発を継続した結果、大変心苦しいのですが、私たちがメトロイドプライムシリーズの続編となるこのタイトルに求める品質には届いていないという現状をお伝えせざるを得なくなりました。
So before we get to some of my theories, and I've got a few about what might happen between now and the eventual release of Metroid Prime 4, I've got some questions that need to be asked, and my mind's been boggled since this news broke about a week ago, just after our last episode of The Insider went up. I've been wondering what the hell has been going on at Retro. If they've gone and pitched Nintendo this idea, does that mean they were just, and surely they wouldn't have been, but at least what we see outwardly is, were they just sitting on their hands since the release of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze? And look, they would have picked up some slack and contributed to the port for the Switch, but really that's next to no work over the course of roughly the last 5 years. What have they been doing? There was this rumour that was circulating last year, not long before E3, that they were going to be working on a Star Fox Grand Prix game, a racing game set in the Star Fox universe, and lots of people were excited about that. Now, we don't know whether that was a legitimate thing or not, but the question remains, what's been going on at Retro? If it was Star Fox, what's now happening to that? And my final question is, why is it always the Metroid franchise that's languishing these days? Now, I can't say that I've been the biggest Metroid fan. It took Jay to introduce it to me in one of the Video Games Club episodes, specifically Super Metroid, a couple of years ago, for me to really kind of latch on. I knew who Samus was and I really enjoyed the character, but I hadn't really given the games a proper go over the years. When I played Super Metroid, my perspective began to change, and I really love this franchise and what it's doing. And I'm trying to work out why it always is that it's the Metroid franchise that seems to cop a bit of a hard time. We had Metroid Other M. The Prime games seem to be kind of shit out every now and then, but without the promotion that perhaps they deserve. And then there was the more recent release of Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS after the Switch had been launched. So it was shot out on this platform that no one really cared about anymore. So there's lots of weird questions and weird things that are going on when it comes to the Metroid franchise, and they're now epitomised by what's going on with this Metroid Prime 4 scenario. In the next segment, we're going to talk about some of my theories about what's going to happen going forward for the Metroid franchise.
それは本作の開発体制自体を見直し、変更することです。具体的には、我々はプロデューサーの田辺と共に、オリジナルのメトロイドプライムシリーズの開発を担当したアメリカのレトロスタジオと互いに信頼し合い、協力して開発を一から再スタートさせることにしました。
For obvious reasons, the game is being basically scrapped and rebuilt, and we don't know how many assets are or are not coming along with it. The Metroid Prime 4 game is going to be quite some time away. Minimum 2 years, you would think, but who knows? So there's a few things that can and maybe should go on in the meantime. The first among those is what I spoke about at the end of the last segment, Metroid Samus Returns. That game, released on the 3DS, sold less than 1 million units despite being on a platform that sold really well at its peak, but was not being valued and considered by hardcore Nintendo fans any longer by the time the game came out, simply because the Switch was available and it was this big hot new thing. You could play Zelda, you could play Mario, there was all these big games. Why am I going back to the 3DS? So bring Samus Returns, Metroid Samus Returns, to the Switch. Port it, upgrade it, HDify it, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. Get that game on the platform. Get it in the hands of more people. The Switch is the hot thing at the moment. It was the top selling console of 2018. Get it in the hands of people and make some magic happen. Then there's the next thing. Where does the Metroid Prime trilogy fit in? Because those games were initially released on the GameCube. 1 and 2 were then released in kind of a port form on the Wii to fit alongside Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, which was a native Wii game. Bring those games to the Switch. Port them across somewhere, maybe the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months, that perfect kind of middle ground between when they project that they'll release Metroid Prime 4 and now, so that you can get a little bit of hype, get a bit of excitement, and make the hardcore Metroid fans feel like they're not forgotten all the time. Then I've got to wonder what's going on with this Star Fox Grand Prix game. Does it exist? If it does, where does that fit? Because you would like to think that if it did in fact exist, if that was actually a thing and it wasn't just all hearsay, that Retro was a long way through this project. Maybe they're going to look to kind of juggle both of these games for a while, which could mean Metroid Prime 4 is even further away. But they might have 12 months of work still to go on the Grand Prix game. They palm it off to someone else to finish the project. They finish it off themselves. How long does that take? When does it release? There's questions around that. I wouldn't rule out the possibility that this game is in fact real and we see it in about a year or so, within the next year or so. They'll kind of transition their way off that project as all hands go on deck to get Metroid Prime 4 done. Lastly, and this is one that I've kind of speculated about over the years on a variety of podcasts, both my own and ones that I've guested on, I want Retro to develop a third-person, action-based Kid Icarus game. My dream is further and further away. Please, someone make this happen. Kid Icarus is a franchise begging for some love and attention. Retro is a fantastic developer that has the right fit. Find someone of a similar pedigree and get this game into existence. Please.
電動とレトロスタジオを代表して本件につきましてどうかご理解いただけますよう心からお願い申し上げます。ありがとうございました。
And so that concludes this week's episode of The Insider. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. All those buttons are down below here, and hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to every new video the moment it goes live on the channel. That includes Patch, The Insider, Player 2 Plays, Late Game Review, Gamer School, and a whole bunch more. There is some awesome content there, so please be sure to go and check it out. Please visit the website, player2.net.au, where you'll find reviews, previews, opinion pieces, news, features, the Player 2 Rise Draft, links to our podcast series, Dev Diary, and the Player 2 podcast, which is now the host of the Player 2 Pixelcast, and a whole bunch more. There's some awesome content there, so please be sure to go and check it out. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/player2au, and consider kicking in a few dollars. At the lower tiers, you get early access to episodes of this and Patched and several other shows. At the higher tiers, you get monthly episode exclusives and the ability to join us in the Player 2 podcast. Finally, there's our Twitch channel. Check that out, twitch.tv/player2au. We've got some streams beginning to occur far more regularly. They're doing some awesome stuff there, so go and check that out. And as we wrap things up, you can find me at Paul James Games on Twitter, The website you'll find at Player2AU on Twitter. And until next time, that has been the whole Metroid Prime 4 discussion, wrapped up for now at least. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.